Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're discussing Ty Simpson, quarterback out of Alabama. We're going to take a look at his height and weight, his production profile, his injury history, his surrounding cast at Alabama, some box scores against ranked competition, some advanced stats. Take a look at some All-22 while I describe some of his strengths and potential areas to improve upon, where he might be drafted, as well as a couple of potential team fits, and finally, what we can expect from him in fantasy. So watch to the end of this video, and you should have a pretty good idea. Now, taking a look at his height and weight, both PFF and NFL Draft Buzz have him listed at 6'2" and 208 pounds. Now, if true, that being 6'2" would be 33rd percentile among collegiate prospects, and then being 208 pounds would be 11th percentile. Both on the lower end of things, but I will say the cutoff mark, in my opinion, for height, especially with quarterbacks, is 6'1". If you aren't at least 6'1", you're just going to be a complete anomaly if you're going to work out at the next level. Somebody like Drew Brees. And as much as I like Drew Brees, there's been one Drew Brees. So height and weight are both adequate enough, but aren't particular strengths of his. We'll get into his injury history as well in a minute here. He's projected to run a 4.80 40-yard dash, which would be 56th percentile. I think he's, fine in a straight line as a linear athlete, but he's not really a dynamic athlete in terms of agility or anything. And I wouldn't describe his overall rushing ability as something dominant, just adequate enough to get it done if he needs to, for instance, scramble for a first down or something. Now, taking a look at his production profile, he is a redshirt junior, but really just did not play at all for the most part before this season. So while being an older prospect, he's also very inexperienced. So it's a bit of a strange profile, to be honest with you. We're not really going to pay too much attention to 2022 through 2024 because, once again, he just didn't really play that much. But taking a look at when he finally was allowed to be the starting quarterback for the Tide, he finished with a 64.6 completion percentage, which started out way stronger at the beginning part of the year. We'll get into some of the injuries, but it did trail off at the end of the year. But once again, ended with a 64.6 overall completion percentage. 35-61 total passing yards at 7.5 yards per attempt, 28 passing touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and an 81.4 PFF pass grade. And then on the ground had 70 attempts for 292 yards, 4.2 yards per attempt, 2 rushing touchdowns, but did fumble 7 total times. So he definitely will need to look to clean up the fumbles, but overall was relatively efficient as a passer. Now, taking a look at his injury history, as I mentioned a little bit earlier when we were talking about his height and weight, he didn't really have any before this season because he didn't start, but he dealt with a multitude of injuries this year, although they were all unrelated. So he dealt with a lower back injury, gastritis, elbow bursitis, and then a fractured rib. So 4 distinct different injuries, although I would say the gastritis from taking anti-inflammatory medication for his back isn't exactly it's just a compounding injury from his previous injury, which I wouldn't really fault him for exactly. He can't exactly help that. It's just from taking a medication. But definitely interesting to take a look at the multitude of injuries we've seen, even if they weren't, season-ending, ridiculous multi-ligament type of injuries or something. Durability does have to be a concern here. Now, discussing his overall tight end / wide receiver play, it ranked 49th in the country with a 73.6 total receiving grade for his teammates. Players that we had expected to take major strides like Ryan Williams dealt with a ton of drops, regressed mightily from his true freshman dominant year, admittedly, to sophomore season. Did have Jeremy Bernard, for instance, who is going to be drafted. We'll see where he ends up going. But I would say that his play overall was not nearly as good as it would have been thought of on paper going into the year. So I do want to give him a little bit of leniency in terms of his production, for instance, because while once again, it looked great on paper heading into the season, it did not materialize that way on the field. Now, taking a look at how he played against ranked competition, in my opinion, this is one of the more important factors. You should expect these guys to dominate when they're playing against unranked competition, guys that are less likely to have players that he'll see at the next level than some of these ranked teams. Well, one important thing to note is he did injure his lower back against South Carolina, and I think that was a big part of why he played much worse down the stretch. And he also did fracture a rib against number one Indiana in his very last game. But taking a look at the beginning of the season, he started out very strong against ranked competition against number 5 at the time, Georgia. 276 yards for a 63.2 completion percentage, 2 touchdowns through the air, no interceptions, 12 yards and a rushing touchdown on the ground. Next week against number 16 at the time, Vanderbilt, 340 passing yards at 74.2 completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, negative 6 yards on the ground with no touchdown there. The following week against number 14 at the time, Mizzou, in a 27-24 win, 200 yards, 74.2 completion percentage, 3 touchdowns through the air, no picks, 7 rushing yards and no rushing touchdown. Then against number 11, Tennessee, for the 4th consecutive win against ranked competition, he finished with 253 passing yards, 65.5 completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, no picks, 8 rushing yards and no rushing touchdown. Then once again, he was injured with that lower back injury against South Carolina. The next game against ranked competition in a loss against number 11 at the time, Oklahoma, 326 passing yards, 66.7 completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, negative 9 rushing yards, and no rushing touchdown. Then against number 3 at the time, University of Georgia, in another loss, 212 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, negative 28 rushing yards, and no rushing touchdown. Then in a win against number 8 at the time, Oklahoma, in a 34-24 win, 232 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, negative 22 rushing yards, and no rushing touchdown. And then finally, in another loss against Indiana, 12 out of 16 for 67 total passing yards, a 75 completion percentage, no touchdown, no picks, 3 rushes for 17 yards and no touchdown. Once again, at the beginning of the collegiate season and in those 4 straight games against ranked competition, he was absolutely cooking. Only 1 interception in those games, did have another rushing touchdown, but really after the injury, he just did not look like the same player. Had a decent showing against Auburn, and Oklahoma, but very mixed bag. And I do think injuries played a part in that, especially when you take a look at his rushing output for the most part after the injury versus before the injury. But yeah, overall, I would say that when you add a little bit of nuance, and it's just, in my opinion, once again, of his performance, I do think that he played relatively well before there were any discernible injuries, and I do think that those injuries affected his play down the stretch. Now, moving on to some advanced stats, I took a look at FBS quarterbacks with 400 or more dropbacks this season, and that was a total of 56 quarterbacks in the sample size. So his PFF passing grade this year of 81.4 was 15th. His adjusted completion percentage of 75.3% was tied for 20th. His yards per attempt of 7.5 is tied for 32nd. He had 28 passing touchdowns, which was tied for 11th most. Only 5 interceptions, which is tied for the 3rd fewest. Very impressive there. His big time throw percentage of 6% was 11th highest as well. His turnover worthy play percentage of 3% was tied for 28th fewest, so about a little around middle of the pack there. His dropped pass percentage, though, of 8.9% was 7th highest. When I tell you, Ryan Williams, especially from what I thought he was going to be as to what he ended up being this year, massive disappointment, and his teammates really did let him down at times. Taking a look at his ADOT, his 8.6 is 37th highest. A little bit more dink and dunk for the most part, but he did throw some shots down the field. His pressure to sack ratio of 18.3% is 17th highest. Really not the most dynamic mover of the football. I would say his quick twitch athleticism is lacking. And it does, especially when there's interior pressure, lead to problems for him, although he's generally good at avoiding edge pressure. His time to throw of 2.95 seconds is also 7th highest. He does need to learn to get the football out a little bit quicker, more consistently, but he does get in rhythms where he's able to dot up the defense and get the ball out pretty quickly. So I have seen at times him be able to do this highly successfully. I think it's just the consistency that's going to be an issue for him. And overall, I do think he needs to lower that time just a little bit. Now, another couple of interesting tidbits I found on X. So somebody posted Ty Simpson, his 7-game split pre-injury, and then 7.5 post-injury split. So his pre-injury split, he was at 70.2% completion percentage for 1,931 yards, 8.9 yards per attempt, 18 touchdowns, only 1 interception, and 12 total sacks. Then post-injury, down to 62% completion percentage, so a significant hit there. 1,636 yards, which is Not significantly fewer over the course of a couple games, depending on the matchup in and of itself, but the yards per attempt way down from 8.9 to 6.7. His touchdowns went from 18 down to 10, 4 interceptions as opposed to 1, and then 17 sacks taken as opposed to 12. So, while yes, he did face, some significant challenges in terms of the level of competition at the end of the season, he had that 4-game stretch, against ranked competition where he was dominating early on. So I think that is a real thing. And I do think that he would be looked at as a little bit better of a prospect if he hadn't sustained those injuries. But at the same time, the injuries do make you worry. Another interesting stat, since 2015, there's only been one quarterback with a minimum of 200 dropbacks in an individual season in the SEC to post over a 3.6 second average time to throw when pressured, under 10-yard ADOT when pressured, and over 5% turnover-worthy play percentage when pressured, and that's Ty Simpson. So those individual stats, while we don't have anyone to compare them to because he's one of one there, that is a little bit worrisome if I'm being honest with you. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Jack, Infamy MTG, AOYOB, The Don, and Any Buckeye. Thank you guys. I'm doing this full time now, and without your support, this would not be possible. If you'd like to become a member, I'm going to leave a link in both the comment section and description of this video. You'll receive not only, but including access to a Discord where we have a channel where we have NFL and college football talk, as well as a channel where we have fantasy football talk, and a third channel where we laugh at poor trade offers that we've been offered in fantasy football. But if you'd like to, you can always DM me with private, questions if you don't wish for it to be known by any community members. But you'll also get help with building your fantasy football teams every year. I'll use wins above replacement, as well as just looking at the general lineup and scoring settings to help you with your teams each year. I'll help you with trades that are advantageous based on those factors as well. You'll be part of a fun and growing active community. You'll not only receive access to videos early guaranteed, but you'll also have the ability to ask for personal videos that you and only you can view. Or potentially, if you'd like something to be shown on the channel, you'll have preferential treatment there as well. So please consider becoming a member. I'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video. While some All-22 clips display some of what I'm going to be mentioning here, I'm going to read you a brief 5 to 7 minute synopsis of Ty Simpson's strengths and potential areas of improvement. So Ty Simpson is a redshirt junior out of Alabama who is a former 5-star recruit and chose to be patient and ride the bench for 3 years before getting a chance to start this season. He stands at 6'2" and 208 pounds, giving him 33rd percentile height and 11th percentile weight for a collegiate prospect at quarterback. One general rule of thumb for me is that if you aren't at least 6'1", you are going to be a huge outlier to work out as the long-term quarterback in the league. So this box is checked, albeit neither his height nor weight are a plus for him, and he dealt with rib, lower back, and elbow injuries this season, leaving us with questions about his durability. Next, we move on to the mental aspect of the position, which involves leadership, poise and pressure situations, such as being clutch, anticipation, pocket presence, and being able to progress through your reads. As far as leadership is concerned, he seems to be a great leader and was named to Alabama's Leadership Council in 2025 and has been described as a leader of men by his teammates, which checks another important box and, in my opinion, is a prerequisite for being successful at the next level. If your teammates don't respect you, even at the collegiate level, they're probably not going to at the next level, especially if you don't mature. But he doesn't seem to have any issues as far as that's concerned. So that's a significant plus in my opinion. He also played well under pressures during tight situations in terms of game script, such as his key drives against Georgia and Mizzou this year, as well as his game winner in the Iron Bowl against Auburn. So that box is definitely checked as well, and is another thing that I really like from my quarterback prospects. Are you clutch? Can we depend on you when it matters the most? As far as processing is concerned, I like to divide this into 2 types, pre and post-snap processing. As far as this pre-snap processing is concerned, I think he inconsistently excels at anticipation against zone coverage. And while he does seem to have an answer for what he's seeing pre-snap and gets through his reads at an acceptable speed most of the time, he does sometimes wait to see his guys get open on corner and out routes, which he does not have the arm talent to make up for the lack of anticipation. As far as his post-snap processing, he gets through his reads at a smooth rate when protected and allowed to work within a clean pocket. He does run into issues when he deals with interior pressure because he doesn't have a lot of pocket mobility with violent movements due to a lack of quick twitch athleticism, much like I mentioned with Fernando Mendoza. and lacks the ability to escape pressure once it's inside the pocket, and pressure can make him speed quickly through his progressions. But he does generally handle edge pressure well and will step up in the pocket to get the ball out. A lack of eye manipulation to keep safeties and linebackers away from his target and staring down his preferred targets leads to occasional interceptions as well. His pocket presence is absolutely fine as far as his ability to sense pressure is concerned. It's just the lack of quick twitch athleticism and lack of consistently stepping up in the pocket to extend the play that doesn't allow him to get out of these situations as easily as the Mahomes and Allens of the world can, which places an importance on him being able to recognize the coverage he's facing and having a plan to get the ball out quickly. Now we move on to the physical aspects of the position, such as arm talent, stationary accuracy, on the run accuracy, and rushing ability. As far as arm talent is concerned, he's fairly average here, and I think he's behind Mendoza as far as this is concerned. He can make shot throws with good timing down the sidelines if he has good base and could get into the throw, much like Mendoza, but he doesn't have an arm, once again, like an Allen or Caleb Williams, who can just rip these throws into tight windows with ease, even when they aren't having to anticipate the windows being open due to having the velocity to make up for it. And he needs to get better at consistently timing these throws to make up for the lack of velocity and get better at anticipating when windows should open. So I do think he has the ability to get it done down the field, but will need to improve here, unlike more physically gifted quarterbacks. As far as his stationary accuracy is concerned, it's mostly great and one of his bigger strengths. He throws with touch when necessary and can rip throws when he can step into them. He can, once again, struggle at times to layer the football over linebackers, but generally throws with good ball placement over the middle of the field, and was hurt a lot this year by his guys dropping easy throws, and that cannot be understated. He's generally money in the short and intermediate areas of the field, but as noted earlier, struggles with consistency with the deep ball while stationary. Now, as far as his on-the-run accuracy is concerned, his accuracy takes a bit of a hit, but once again, like Mendoza's, is functional. His lack of arm talent does hinder his ability to throw down the field with zip and as much accuracy on off-platform throws, but is still very accurate in the short area of the field while on the run. As far as his rushing upside is concerned, it's probably a little bit better than Mendoza's in my opinion, but marginally. Much like Mendoza, he can pick up a first down here and there, but will not be a true dual threat quarterback. Because he just lacks the speed and burst to be a danger on zone reads or designed runs. So I don't think that'll be a staple of the offense he's asked to run at the next level. Finally, what type of offense did he run at Alabama, and will he need to adjust to a more complex system at the next level? Well, at Alabama, Coach DeBoer employs a multiple modern offense that utilizes a lot of shotgun looks with pro-style inside/outside zone run game concepts, that uses a blend of RPOs and short to intermediate passing game, which I think is fine. And I think much like that, he'll be a good fit for a West Coast offense that utilizes the short and intermediate passing game, more horizontally than vertically, with a lot of motion and timing, which is a relatively common type of offense at the next level. So there's a good chance he's drafted by a team with an OC that utilizes this kind of offensive scheme. So I think that's good for him. I think he has the pre and post snap processing ability and accuracy to thrive in a system like this. But I would love it even more for him if he's allowed to sit for a period of time before being thrown into the fire, as despite being a redshirt junior, he did not start a full season until his final collegiate year. There's a lot to be excited about with Simpson, especially if he's drafted into a situation that allows him to sit for a period of time, or at least is protected enough by virtue of having a decent offensive line, run game, and receivers to not be asked to immediately carry a team on his shoulders from square one. But we'll see. Who knows where he's going to go, but there's a lot to be excited about once again. Now, where is he projected to go? Well, it's anywhere from middle of the first to potentially early second. If I had to guess, some team's probably going to take a chance on him, at least in the mid first. I do think he ends up getting first round draft capital. Somebody like Jackson Dart was similar, where there were mixed reviews, but a team like the Giants decided to make the swing, and it's looking pretty good for them so far. So hopefully the same happens with Simpson. Once again, a brief summarization of his strengths and potential areas to improve upon. He does have consistent mechanics, but more so, it's his head and his feet being tied together, and it works out for him more when he's not being pressured. He does handle edge pressure quite well. He'll step up in the pocket, make a nice throw, but he does struggle with interior pressure. He just doesn't have the quick twitch athleticism to get out to the edge and win. He understands generally how to beat zone coverage, and when he gets into a rhythm is really like a doctor. He'll dissect the defense easily, but he didn't do so quite as consistently as I would personally like. And I think that's one of the differences as to why Mendoza is going to be a locked in 101 versus potentially a mid to late first or even early second with Simpson. Um, he's generally accurate over the middle of the field, but does struggle layering the ball over linebackers at times. I think height is a part of a reason for that. But, he gets through his progressions once again when he's protected quite well. Just would like a little bit more consistency because he does speed it up against pressure. I want to see him consistently manipulate defenders with his eyes. At times, he does not look off safeties and kind of stares down where he's going. And at times, he doesn't play with the requisite anticipation on some of those outbreaking corner and out routes that I would like to see and can lead to interceptions at the next level. And he kind of has average arm talent that I would describe as a little bit worse than Mendoza's, but somewhat similar. So definitely some strengths that we really want to see in our quarterbacks. And he's also a good leader once again. But definitely things to consider in terms of areas to improve upon, which would lead him to not be one of these top shelf prospects as a quarterback. Now, as far as my pro comparison, I think he's Mac Jones plus. So the plus is that I think his rushing upside is a little bit better. Like maybe early career Kirk Cousins could be a comp as far as that's concerned. And I think Kirk Cousins is also a decent enough comp for him. But I think Mac Jones, really good accuracy when given a clean pocket to work with. Average arm talent, doesn't really have the zip to get, some of those balls down the field there if he's not anticipating them, as opposed to just having the wicked arm talent to just be able to zip it in there even without anticipating. Doesn't really deal with pressure as well in terms of interior pressure, and much like Mac Jones, doesn't have the quick twitch athleticism to get out of the situations, but can step up into the pocket to make a throw when necessary when the edge pressure is getting to him. So very similar in that regard, but once again, I think he's a little bit better of an athlete and going to get you more rushing yardage than Mac Jones did. Where do I think the dynasty community will probably have him ranked? Somewhere in that QB 18 to 24 range after those locked in, established starters that either, are on rookie contracts and have already shown us a decent amount of upside, or locked in quarterbacks with those long-term contracts. I think, QB 18 to 24 is somewhere in that mid to low end QB2 range. Assuming he gets the first round draft capital, which I think he does get. A couple of potential fits. I think, the Jets at 16 could potentially be an option if they want to take a risk there. I think the Browns at 24. They may just elect to give Shedeur Sanders another year, though. Who knows? I think the Rams at 29 would be a perfect fit for him, especially, sitting behind Stafford, learning. That would be fantastic for him. I think the Jets at 33, once again, if he doesn't go into the late first. I think the Cards at 34. The Dolphins at 43 is potentially like a bottom range where you could go. Where would I take him in rookie drafts? Probably late round 1 to potentially mid round 2. Once again, just depending on where he's drafted and the overall draft capital are concerned. Now, taking a look at my current quarterback rankings, I've only done 2 so far, so Mendoza and Simpson. I have Mendoza easily in tier 1. He's a locked in 101 in terms of real life. I think he's more of a sure thing compared to Ty Simpson, but I think Simpson also has a decent amount of upside. As far as his fit in a West Coast style offense. But I do think that Simpson, he's not guaranteed the same, he's almost guaranteed to not get the same draft capital overall. And I do think he has more questions than Mendoza does. But I think that these guys are probably going to be the only quarterbacks in tier 1 and tier 2, if I'm being honest with you. Somebody that I thought had a lot of upside in Trinidad Chambliss, it looks like he is going to be allowed to go back to Ole Miss. That's yet another quarterback that potentially we get for 2027 as a depth piece, with a chance to have some fantasy upside as opposed to helping out the 26 class, which is already really struggling for depth basically everywhere but receiver is concerned. So I do think that there's a distinction between Mendoza and Simpson, but I do think that these are probably going to be the top 2 quarterbacks by a significant margin in this year's draft. And so, what are your thoughts on Ty Simpson? Let me know below in the comment section. Are there any strengths or potential areas of improvement that I didn't mention that you think are worth conversating about? If so, let me know below. If you would be so kind, I would really appreciate your support via Patreon. Thank you to my Patreon members. Without your support, this wouldn't be possible. If you cannot or do not wish to, if you could just like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below, I'd really appreciate it. With all that being said, thanks guys, and have a good day.